You're sitting beside a fire. The year is 50,000 years ago. No cities, no electricity, no written history, just darkness. And smoke. Smoke rising from burning branches. Smoke drifting into eyes, into noses, into lungs. Most people turn away, but one person doesn't. He sits still, watching the smoke curl into the night sky. Then, he takes a breath. One deep inhale, and then another. The strange part is, he doesn't stop. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Because smoking sounds like a terrible idea. Smoke burns your eyes, makes it harder to breathe, scratches your throat. There seems to be no reason at all to deliberately inhale it. So, why did ancient humans start doing it? And if tobacco wouldn't appear until much later, what exactly were people smoking tens of thousands of years ago? The answer may take us back to the moment humans first learned to control fire, a time so distant that smoking may actually be older than agriculture itself. And perhaps it all began on a night like this. One night, 50,000 years ago, imagine you are that hunter. You've been walking for most of the day. Your feet ache. Your shoulders are exhausted. The stone spear in your hand is still stained with the blood of the animal you hunted. You don't know how old you are. No one in your tribe knows their exact age. There are no birthdays, no documents, no calendars, no concept of time as we understand it today. Only rainy seasons, dry seasons, and memories. As the sun begins to set, you return to camp. The others have already built a fire. The smell of roasting meat fills the air. Children laugh nearby. Stone strikes against stone. Wood crackles in the flames. This isn't just a place to eat. It's not just a place to sleep. This is the center of the entire world. The fire is the heart of the tribe. If the fire goes out, everything becomes more dangerous. Without fire, predators come closer. Without fire, the darkness becomes more frightening. Without fire, food becomes harder to digest. Without fire, humans lose one of their greatest advantages. That's why our ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years living around fires, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. And that led to something strange. No animal on Earth has been exposed to smoke as much as humans. Think about that. Lions don't sit around campfires. Deer don't sit around campfires. Wolves don't sit around campfires. But humans do, every single day, for hundreds of thousands of years. We inhaled more smoke than almost any other creature on the planet. Smoke became a normal part of life. So familiar. It was almost invisible. But then, something interesting began to happen. Not all smoke was the same. Some woods produced pleasant smells. Some made your eyes burn. Some made you want to move away immediately. And sometimes, what was thrown into the fire wasn't wood at all. A strange branch. A patch of dried grass. A sharp-smelling leaf. A plant growing near the river. A species nobody paid much attention to. At least, not until it burned. Because when it burned, its smoke was different. The hunter noticed it first. At first, it was only a feeling. Difficult to describe, as if his body felt a little lighter. As if his mind slowed down just a little. As if his worries disappeared for a moment. Not much. Just enough to notice. He had no way to understand what was happening. How could he? The world had no words for things like dopamine, nicotine, or psychoactive chemicals. But he knew one thing. Tonight felt different. And the next day, when he passed that same plant again, he stopped. He looked at it longer than usual, picked a few leaves, and carried them back to camp. No one knew that this tiny moment, this simple decision, might be the beginning of one of the oldest human behaviors in history. Why aren't humans afraid of smoke? There's something very strange about humans. Most animals avoid smoke. They smell it, and they run. Because in nature, smoke usually means danger. It means wildfire. It means destruction. It means death. But humans are different. We sit beside fire. We sleep beside fire. We eat beside fire. And for hundreds of thousands of years, we breathed its smoke every single day. To our ancestors, smoke wasn't a warning sign. It was a sign of safety. Where there was smoke, there was fire. Where there was fire, there was family. There was food. There was protection from predators. And then, one day, a strange plant falls into the flames. Its smoke is different. A hunter sitting nearby barely notices at first. But a few minutes later, something feels different. He feels calmer, more relaxed, lighter somehow. He doesn't know why, but he remembers the feeling. And the next day, he goes back looking for that exact plant. This may have been the most important moment of all. because smoking didn't begin when someone accidentally inhaled smoke. It began when someone chose to do it a second time. And that simple act of curiosity may have opened an entirely new chapter in human history. The first time smoke made someone feel different. Imagine a night 50,000 years ago. A small group of humans sits around a fire. A mother cradles her child. An elder tells stories. A hunter has just returned after a long day tracking prey. He's exhausted. Every muscle aches. His legs can barely support his weight. Then someone throws more branches onto the fire. No one notices that mixed in with the wood is a different kind of plant. A wild plant growing near the river. The smoke begins to rise. Thicker. Stronger. Different. The hunter is sitting closest to the flames. He inhales the smoke. Once. Then again. At first, nothing happens. But a few minutes later, something changes. His body feels lighter. The aches seem less intense. His mind becomes strangely calm, not because he understands what's happening. He knows nothing about chemistry, nothing about nicotine, nothing about compounds that affect the human brain. He only knows one thing. Tonight feels different from every other night. And that's what makes this moment so important. Humans forget many things, but they rarely forget powerful experiences, especially experiences that make them feel better. The next day, the hunter passes the place where that plant was growing. He stops, looks at it, then gathers a few branches to bring back to camp. No one tells him to do it. No one teaches him. It's simply curiosity. But that curiosity may have changed human history, because the first time was an accident. The second time was a choice. And when someone intentionally recreated that same smoke, to experience that same feeling again, the act of smoking was truly born. From that moment on, smoke was no longer just something rising from a fire. It became something worth remembering, something worth seeking, something worth repeating, and before long, others in the tribe began to notice as well, because they were about to discover something remarkable. Smoke didn't just change the way one person felt. It had the power to change the feelings of an entire group at the same time. What did the elder of the tribe notice? At first, only the hunter paid attention to the unusual smoke, but eventually, others began to notice it too, especially the elder of the tribe. He had lived longer than most, seen more winters, more hunts, more deaths. He was not the strongest person in the group, but he was the most observant, and he began to notice something strange. Whenever that particular plant was thrown into the fire, people seemed different. They were less tense, less quick to anger. Arguments became less common. Stories lasted longer into the night. Hunters sat quietly and listened. Children cried less often. Even those who had endured difficult days seemed calmer, as if the entire group was sharing the same feeling. At first, it was only an observation, but gradually, it became a habit. Whenever the tribe gathered, whenever there was a celebration, whenever stories of the ancestors were told, that plant found its way back into the fire. No one called it a ritual. The concept didn't even exist yet, but that was exactly what was beginning to form. A repeated action, again and again, across countless nights, across generations, and, perhaps for the first time in history, humans discovered that smoke could do more than affect an individual. It could bring an entire community together. But this was only the beginning, because before long, some people started to believe that the smoke did more than change how they felt. They believed it allowed them to see things that ordinary people could not see, to hear messages hidden in the darkness, to feel closer to unseen forces, to touch something beyond the everyday world. And that was the moment smoking began to change. It was no longer just part of daily life. It was becoming something sacred, something mysterious, something powerful, a bridge between ordinary existence and the world of ritual and spirit. The first healer, in a world with no hospitals, no medicine, and no doctors. Getting sick was terrifying. A small wound could become a death sentence. A fever could last for days. A toothache could make it impossible to eat. Ancient people knew nothing about bacteria, nothing about infection, nothing about disease. They only knew that sometimes the body suddenly became weak, and no one knew why. In the tribe lived an older man. He was no longer strong enough to hunt, no longer fast enough to keep up with the younger hunters. But he possessed something even more valuable: experience. Over the course of his life, he had observed hundreds of plants, hundreds of roots, hundreds of leaves. He remembered which plants were safe to eat, which were poisonous, which seemed to ease pain, and which produced unusual smoke when burned. One day, a hunter returned to camp with a deep wound in his leg. The pain was so severe, he could barely stand. The tribe didn't know what to do. All they could do was wait. But the old man tried something different. He threw several dried leaves into the fire. Smoke slowly rose into the air. The injured hunter sat nearby, breathing it in. After a while, the pain seemed to ease. Not completely, but enough for him to notice the difference. Perhaps it was the mild effect of the plant. Perhaps it was belief. Perhaps it was both. But to ancient people, that distinction didn't matter. What mattered was that it seemed to help. And this may be how some of humanity's earliest healing practices were born, not in laboratories, but through observation, trial and error, failure and experimentation, repeated across countless generations. People began seeking out the old man more often. When someone was in pain, when someone couldn't stop coughing, when someone couldn't sleep, when someone was haunted by nightmares, he would bring different plants, different leaves, different kinds of smoke. Gradually, he became more than just an elder. He became a healer, one of the oldest roles in human history. Thousands of years later, similar ideas appeared in civilizations across the world. In ancient Egypt, people burned herbs to help treat certain respiratory conditions. In ancient Greece, physicians used the smoke and vapors of plants in various healing practices. In ancient India, Ayurvedic traditions describe the inhalation of herbal smoke as a therapeutic technique. These civilizations were separated by vast distances, separated by languages, separated by centuries. Yet they shared one remarkable belief, that smoke could heal. Today, we know that not every kind of smoke is beneficial. In fact, many forms of smoke are harmful. But what is fascinating is that the basic idea never disappeared. The concept of delivering substances into the body through the lungs still exists today. Nebulizers, asthma inhalers, anesthetic gases used during surgery, all rely on the same fundamental principle, introducing a substance into the lungs to affect the body. Perhaps the first healer had no idea what he was truly doing. He knew nothing about chemistry, nothing about biology, nothing about medicine. But he discovered something important. Certain plants could change the way people felt, and sometimes that was enough to ease suffering. But ancient humans were about to notice something even stranger. Smoke didn't just relieve pain, it didn't just calm the mind, it didn't just help people relax. Sometimes, it made people feel as though they were stepping beyond ordinary reality, as if they were entering another world entirely. And that was the moment smoke became more than medicine, more than comfort, more than curiosity. It became deeply connected to ritual, to spirituality, and to some of humanity's oldest beliefs. When smoke became a gateway to the spirit world, at first, smoke was simply part of the fire, something ordinary, something familiar. But over time, some people began to notice something different. There was a special person in the tribe. He wasn't the greatest hunter, he wasn't the strongest warrior, and he wasn't the chief. Yet whenever something strange happened, people came to him. He was the keeper of old stories, the interpreter of unusual dreams, the observer of signs in the sky, the one who tried to understand what others could not. One night, he sat alone beside the fire. Once again, the mysterious plant was thrown into the flames. Smoke rose upward, slowly, thickly, surrounding him. He breathed it in, and then again, the fire danced before his eyes. The shadows on the cave walls seemed to move, at least. That's how it felt. The sound of the wind seemed farther away. The insects sounded louder. Time itself appeared to slow down. And then, he saw something. Perhaps it was only imagination. Perhaps it was a dream. Perhaps it was the effect of the burning plant. But to him, the experience felt completely real. The next day, he told the tribe what he had seen. He said he had met those who had died long ago. He said he had seen spirit animals guiding him. He said he had received messages from somewhere beyond this world. The others listened, not because they knew it was true, but because some of them had experienced similar things themselves. Before long, smoke was no longer just smoke. It became a tool for entering a different state of mind, a place somewhere between reality and imagination, between memory and dream. In the darkness of prehistory, no one understood how the brain worked. No one knew about chemistry. No one knew about neuroscience. But they knew one thing. Smoke could change what they felt. And when something changes the way you experience the world, it is very easy to see it as magic. Gradually, the gatherings around the fire began to change. People sat in circles. The flames burned at the center. Smoke drifted into the night sky. Stories of ancestors were passed from one generation to the next. Whispered prayers filled the darkness. And perhaps the earliest human rituals were born in moments like these. To ancient people, smoke seemed to do something extraordinary. It rose into the sky, then disappeared into the darkness, as if it were carrying human words to another world. Today, we might call that symbolism. But tens of thousands of years ago, it may have been belief, a belief so powerful that it survived across countless generations. And that was the moment everything changed. Smoking was no longer just a pleasant sensation, no longer just curiosity. It became ritual. It became tradition. It became part of humanity's attempt to understand the mysteries it could not explain. But another discovery was waiting just ahead. A far more practical one, because some people began to realize that smoke did more than alter the mind. Sometimes, it seemed to ease pain, to calm suffering, to bring comfort to the sick and injured. And that may have been the moment smoke became something else entirely. One of the earliest forms of medicine in human history. Up to this point, everything seems to make sense. But there's still one problem. How do we know ancient people actually inhaled smoke on purpose? How do we know this isn't just speculation? That's where archaeology enters the story. And what scientists discovered is truly remarkable. In 2019, archaeologists studying an ancient burial site in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia uncovered evidence dating back more than 2,500 years. Among the discoveries were wooden braziers, stones that had once been heated by fire, and most importantly, chemical traces preserved on their surfaces. When scientists analyzed those residues, they found evidence of cannabis. Not just ordinary cannabis, but plants containing unusually high levels of psychoactive compounds. That detail changes everything, because it suggests these people weren't using random plants. They knew exactly what they were burning, and they were likely using it as part of ritual ceremonies. But that's not even the most surprising part. More than 2,500 years ago, a Greek historian named Herodotus wrote about a nomadic people known as the Scythians. He described a strange ritual. The Scythians would build small enclosed tents, place red-hot stones inside, then throw hemp seeds and cannabis onto the heated rocks. Smoke would quickly fill the space, and according to Herodotus, the people inside would begin shouting with joy. For centuries, many historians weren't sure whether to believe him. Perhaps he exaggerated. Perhaps he misunderstood what he saw. Perhaps it was just another ancient story. But then archaeology caught up with history. Scientists uncovered exactly the kinds of objects he described. Burning vessels, heated stones, residues containing cannabis compounds. The evidence matched the ancient account in remarkable ways. For the first time, a story written thousands of years ago was supported by physical evidence. And that tells us something important. The practice of inhaling plant smoke existed long before tobacco was ever discovered. And it may be far older than we once imagined. But all of this evidence leads to an even bigger question. If humans have been doing this for thousands of years, why did they start in the first place? Was it for pleasure? Was it curiosity? Was it medicine? Or was there something much deeper driving this behavior? Something rooted in the very nature of being human? When we look at the past, everything changes. When we hear the word smoking, we usually think about addiction, a habit, a pleasure, a form of entertainment. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? Because the deeper we look into history, the more it seems that ancient people didn't begin inhaling smoke simply for enjoyment. At least, not at first. Think about everything we've seen so far. A hunter finds relief after a long and exhausting day. A healer uses smoke to ease suffering. An elder incorporates it into rituals. An entire tribe gathers around a fire and shares the same experience. That doesn't sound like entertainment. It sounds more like a survival tool. Smoke may have helped people relax in a world filled with danger. It may have eased pain when no medicine existed. It may have strengthened social bonds during difficult times. It may have helped explain mysteries that no one could understand. In other words, smoking may have begun as an ancient social technology, a way for humans to adapt to a harsh and unforgiving world. That idea may sound strange, but remember the reality our ancestors faced. There were no hospitals, no police, no secure homes, no safety nets, no support systems beyond the tribe itself. In that kind of world, anything that reduced pain, strengthened connection, created a sense of safety, or inspired hope would have been incredibly valuable. And perhaps that is the biggest twist in this entire story. Ancient people may not have started inhaling smoke to escape reality. They may have started because they were trying to face reality. A reality that was cold, harsh, unpredictable, filled with illness, filled with danger, filled with uncertainty. Maybe smoking did not begin as a pleasure. Maybe it began as a solution so ancient that it existed before cities, before agriculture, before kingdoms, before writing, and perhaps before history itself. The story of smoking, then, is not simply the story of a habit. It is the story of humanity, of curiosity, of suffering, of survival, of our endless search for comfort, meaning, and connection in a world that often offered very little of any of them. And that search may have begun beside a fire. 50,000 years ago, from primitive campfires to modern cigarettes, imagine two scenes. One takes place tens of thousands of years ago. The other unfolds in the modern world. In the first scene, a group of ancient humans sits around a fire. The hunt is over. The cold night has arrived. The day's struggles are behind them. Smoke drifts upward into the darkness. There are no advertisements, no corporations, no markets, no profits, just people, fire, and curiosity. In the second scene, an executive sits inside a modern office. Spread across the desk are revenue reports, marketing strategies, growth projections, plans for expanding into new markets, millions of customers, billions of dollars. And yet, both stories revolve around the same thing, smoke, but they belong to completely different worlds. For ancient humans, smoke was part of life, part of ritual, part of healing, part of community. For the modern world, it gradually became something else, a product, an industry, a global business. For thousands of years, the inhalation of smoke was connected to belief, to medicine, to ceremony, to shared human experiences, but only in the last few centuries did it become a mass consumer habit, a commercial product manufactured on an enormous scale. And that is why, when we look back through history, we need to separate two very different stories: the history of smoke and the history of modern tobacco. They share a common origin, but they do not share the same meaning. The hunter sitting beside a fire 50,000 years ago and the executive running a modern tobacco company are both looking at the same phenomenon, the same drifting smoke, the same human fascination with altering experience. Yet the distance between them is greater than the distance between two eras, greater than the distance between two cultures. In many ways, it is the distance between two entirely different worlds. One world saw smoke as a tool for survival, the other transformed it into a commodity. One gathered around a fire beneath the stars. The other built factories, brands, and global markets. And perhaps that is the final lesson of this story. The smoke itself did not change. Humans did. The meanings we attached to it changed. The reasons we sought it changed. The world around it changed. But if you follow the trail all the way back, past the advertisements, past the industries, past the empires, past the written records, you eventually arrive at a simple scene: a small fire, a dark night, a curious hunter, and a thin stream of smoke rising into the sky. A moment so ancient that it may have happened long before history had a name. So, when did humans first start smoking? The truth is, nobody knows for sure. But there is one thing we do know. This behavior is older than any civilization, older than any empire, and perhaps almost as old as fire itself. One night, long before history began, an ancient human sat by the campfire, watching the smoke rise into the night sky, and inhaled, just once. Nobody knew that this tiny action would endure for tens of thousands of years, because sometimes, human history doesn't begin with battles. It doesn't begin with kings. It doesn't begin with cities. But it begins with a curious human, sitting in the dark, and wondering what would happen if they tried something completely new.